Hello, everyone. Today we will be continuing our pre-intermediate lessons. We are talking about the potential form, which is, in simple English, it's the can or the can't. I can do this, I can't do that. And this one you use all the time. It's probably one of the most common verb conjugations that we use. And so it's definitely, once you get this down, it's going to make your life so much easier because you'll have a much wider range of things that you can talk about. Especially when you go to Japan. Japan's kind of a crazy place. And if you are trying new foods, trying new experiences, there are probably going to be things that you can and cannot do. And if there is some wild food in front of you that you're not crazy about eating, you're going to need this to let them know that you can't have it. So let's get started. And if you're not already there, I have the screen share for Renshu. And you also have the VC Events text channel, which is where we do all of our examples and whatnot. Let's get started. So the potential form, this is the same in English and in Japanese. It talks about two different things, actually. It talks about things that you are able to do. For example, I can read kanji, I can swim, I can drive a car. It can also talk about what is possible or not possible. For example, you can eat natto here, and you cannot enter this building after 9 o'clock. And so we're going to talk about both usages in today's lesson. We have previously talked about this koto ga dekiru phrase, but we're going to focus on this one is going to be the more common, the one that we're talking about today, which is actually conjugating the verb itself. There is, we've talked about, up until now, we've talked about a few different endings with verbs. We've talked about, for example, if you say, I want to eat something, you take taberu and you change it to tabetai. We've talked about present tense. We've talked about past tense. This, I believe, is the first time we're actually changing the base of the verb. Up until now, we have, in a sense, only changed the ending of the verb. This one, we're actually changing the verb itself, and then we're conjugating it after that. So that may sound a little strange, but you'll see how it plays out. Like all other verb conjugations or changes to the verb, these will change depending on which category the verb is in. And we're using the same categories we've used up until now. We have our ichidan verbs. And real fast, let's do a quick review. Give me all the ichidan verbs you can think of. And if you can't, which one are the ichidan ones? Those are the ones that if you're using the mas form, you drop the ru and you add mas. So please give me the verb and the English next to it if you can. So real fast, I'll give you a minute. All the ichidan verbs you can think of. You can use kanji, you can use hiragana, you can use romaji, whatever works best for you. So I put taberu to eat, neru to sleep, kiru to wear, okiru to wake up, tsukeru to attach something or to turn something on, miru to see, wakeru to share. What else? Now, if you're the type of person that when someone says, hey, what are all the examples of this type of word, and you can't think of them, don't worry. That's me. I probably could not think of the ones that are in front of me right now, although I know all of those words. So I'm in the same boat. Hajimeru to begin, deru to leave. Good. And I see one person typing in one more. I'll let them finish typing it up and then we'll keep going. So, these are all ichidan verbs because neru would be nemasu, kiru, kimasu, okiru, okimasu. Here you just add the mas onto the end. When you're converting it into the potential form, there's two different ways to do it. And they're both there on the screen. And we're going to talk about how those are different, so don't worry, we'll mention those. So, like the mas, you drop the ru. So with those ichidan verbs, you're always dropping the ru and then adding something else. I'm going to say, for now, you add rareru. You drop ru and you add rareru. And the person that just asked that question, I will get to that in just a minute. That's a very good question, but we'll definitely hit on it. Rareru is also very fun to say, so definitely try saying it. So if it's potential, if it's ichidan, then you would say, rareru, taberareru. Going to our godan verbs, and just like with every other verb form, we always take that last character and we change it a bit, right? If we were taking motsu and we were changing it to the mas form, we changed the tsu to the chi, and we'd add mas. This one is no different. We changed the ending, which is the u ending. We change it to the e, and then we add ru to the end. So let me give you a few examples. So motsu is already there on the screen. Motsu changes to moteru. If you're pushing someone, osu. Su changes to se, and then add the ru, oseru. If you're talking about buying something, u changes to e, kao changes to kaeru. So you're changing that ending and you're adding the ru onto the end of it. Now we're going to practice this in just a minute, don't worry. Our special verbs, kuru would change to korareru, or that second version, which again we'll talk about in just a minute. Now suru is wild. Suru, there's a special word for suru, and it's not really you're changing suru, it's just you're not using suru anymore, you're using this other one, and it's dekiru. So the potential form of suru is dekiru, which kind of is its own, its own verb in itself. So real fast, let me talk about these two special ones, and then we will practice a little bit, coming up with these. So why do these exist? A couple of people earlier mentioned it, but there is another, unfortunately for us, there are several different base forms that you can learn in Japanese. And real quickly, I'm going to name off all the ones I can think of. We've got potential, which is what we're learning today. We've got passive, we've got humble, we've got the honorific, and I feel like there's one more, but it's not popping up, but there's several. The causative, yes, I probably blocked that out of my head. The passive, which we aren't learning yet, and the potential look exactly the same for these two verbs, these two groups of verbs. So real fast, so what I'm saying is if we've got taberu, there's your base verb, to eat. Taberare, taberareru. This is the potential form. Taberareru is also the passive form. Same with kuru. Korareru is the potential form. Korareru is also the passive form. So, as language evolves, spoken language in particular, but written as well, has evolved to where the second form is a bit more common. So there's actually a term for it that refers to this, but with your ichidan verbs, as well as with kuru, you often see the ra dropped. And so instead of And that is nice because that is potential only. You cannot change the passive. You cannot make the passive shorter. So if someone says tabereru, you know they're saying I can eat. If someone says taberareru, they might be saying I can eat. They might be saying I was eaten. And that's a distinction that's nice to have. So more and more frequently, you will hear tabereru, for example, or kureru. It's not kureru. Excuse me. That's a small mistake. Koreru. I'll fix that as soon as this lesson's done. So just like korareru, you drop the ra and it becomes koreru. If you give me just a second, let me make a quick note of that just so I can make sure that gets fixed. Thank you. Now, depending on if some of you might be taking Japanese classes, at a university, a local community center, whatever, different people, Japanese teachers have different feelings about this. Some Japanese speakers or Japanese teachers will say that the second form, tabereru or koreru, are not correct. They will say that is incorrect Japanese. This is going by the letter, the letter of the law sense of, the rule says you have to do this. Therefore, anything that's not the rule is incorrect. However, language is living and languages evolve. And it has evolved here over many decades to where this has become common and accepted by, I'm going to say 95, 99% of people. And so do not be afraid of saying tabereru or koreru. You will be okay and you'll have no problems. But some people will say, that's not correct. In the same way that there's some English that is accepted by almost all native English speakers, but people that are focused on the grammar might say grammatically that's not correct. You should say this. But common speakers say it the other way. That's the same thing here. Okay, before we jump, I put this on here just so we don't have to look at those things before. I'd like to practice just a little bit. Let's practice coming up with these potential versions. So I'm going to give you the base version. And then I'd like you to give me the potential version. In the same way that if I say taberu, I'd like you to give me tabereru. Okay? Let's get started. How about hanasu? And it's not a who can type first, so I'll let a couple people type in before I say what's right or what's wrong. Well, if someone does, but it's always good to type it. It helps you practice. Hanaseru. Good. How about if you're talking about I can swim? How would you change oyogu? Good, good. How about you were talking about, let's talk about kanji, and you say, yeah, I can write kanji. Kaku. Good. Kakeru. Okay, how about if you're talking about trying to put something on and you're like, that, I can put that on. Or more likely, you might say, that's too small, I can't put that on. Oh, I've outgrown this. And hint, there's two versions here. I see one of them popping up. What's the other one? Let's get both of them out there. Good, good. Okay. する. All right, bonus question. わかる. To understand. It's a bonus question. Think about that. So, there's not really a potential form that we use with wakaru. So you don't hear wakareru. Technically, that would be the potential form, but because wakaru always is already showing potential, it's already saying I understand or I am unable to understand. I don't understand something. I can't understand something. If you say I understand something, it's wakaru. If you don't understand it, it's wakaranai or wakarimasen. So we don't usually, des does not have a potential form because des is just a state. You know, it's a state of marker. So you're just saying, I am Genki or I am a teacher. So it wouldn't be, so if you said, you know, I'm a teacher, sensei desu. There's not really a way to say I can. I think what you're saying is if this was I am a teacher, right? Then you might be thinking, well, how do I say I can become a teacher? Then you might say something like this. You'd use the naru verb for become, and you might say something like this. For example, I have a license, so sensei ni nareru. I can become a teacher if I want. Which, if you think about it, that is the potential because you're saying it's possible for me to change into that state of being a teacher or whatever. But good question. Now, there is one special form that you don't hear that often, but we're going to mention it because, you know, for completeness sake. Aru does have a form that's arieru. And you've probably, if you're a fan of Japanese, Japanese culture, pop culture, you've probably heard the negative form of this, arienai, which means what? Yeah, it's like that's impossible. That's not possible. And so arieru refers to, you know, whether or not a situation is possible. So you might say, you know, oh, I'm going to use, for example, you're meeting someone. You know, a group of friends are meeting, and so and Tom is late. Tom hasn't shown up. And someone says, you know, and I can't find my question marker. Where is it? Where is it? I must not have been using it lately. It's gone. Okay, someone else wants to mark that with the Galchan question. Tom wa mata nebo shimashita kana? Like, I wonder if Tom overslept again. Thank you, whoever did that. You might respond to that with arieru, saying, yeah, that's possible. Yeah, it's possible that he overslept. Like, he oversleeps sometimes. Yeah, arieru. Or if, you know, someone said, oh, yesterday I swam 1,000,000 meters. And you're like, wait, that's not possible. You know, you might say arienai. But put this to the side. That's not one that you're going to necessarily need to use quite as often. But for completion's sake, let's put it there. So let's Let's continue. Now, this is the cool thing. So I told you that this isn't truly conjugation. You're kind of changing the base form of the term. So much that I'm not sure if you knew that Kacchan had this functionality, but if you use the conj command, you get, for some reason, O is appearing in a couple spots. I don't know, who knows why. But down here we have these base forms down here. And we've got these base forms that they all end in root. And it's like that because you're changing it from one verb into another verb. But after that, you still need to conjugate it. So if we talk about tabereru, going back to the same form that we have, this is to be able to eat, or can eat, I guess. But we still need to change it to present tense or past tense. You know, I can eat, I can't eat, I could eat, I couldn't eat. So we're taking that and we're still conjugating it in the end. The nice thing about it is every verb, once you change the base form, they all become ichidan. So if we have base forms cannot mix and match except causative passive. So if we have tabereru, and you're like, yes, I can eat that. Taberemasu. Taberemasu. One too many re's in there. There we go. If you say, I cannot eat it, taberemasen. And someone said, oh, hey, yesterday you tried natto for the first time, right? Were you able to eat it? And you say, yeah, tabereta. Yes. I mean, you could say, yes, I ate it, tabeta. But you said, yeah, I was able to eat it, tabereta. And same with every other potential form. You're going to use the you're going to use the ichidan rules for conjugating it past that. So that's nice. Even dekiru, which is a crazy verb, still they're all ichidan in the end. Now, we still haven't gotten to actual sentences, full sentences. We're getting there. We're building it up slowly. There's one more thing that we're going to touch on lightly here, and that is particle usage. Usually, note, I'm not saying always, but usually when you are using the potential form, you do not use the o. You usually use ga. So if you said, for example, I read kanji, which I guess is kind of a strange thing to say, but let's skip to our eating example. And you say I eat natto. You'd say natto taberu. If you want to say, however, I can eat natto, you usually use the ga. You typically use the ga. So here, natto ga tabereru. Now, you can leave the o. That's fine. And I don't have any statistical data to give you to say, 70% of the time people use ga compared to o. But ga is more common by far. So usually you'll hear, kanji ga yomeru, natto ga tabereru, kono dansu ga dekinai, or dekiru. But you can use the o. However, with dekiru, you cannot use the o. Period. You need ga. So instead of tennisu o suru, I play tennis, you could say I can play tennis. Tennisu ga dekiru. So for me, I would feel comfortable switching between the two. I've spoken Japanese for a long time. I just use ga all the time. It's never going to add this weird nuance that you need to worry about, and it's never going to be wrong. If I'm using the potential form, I'm using ga. And that, keeps it keeps it easy. Just know that you might see that O pop in there from time to time. And just as a side note, that pattern we learned earlier in a previous lesson, that koto ga dekiru, that's basically the same thing that's happening down here. Tennisu is a noun, but just like verb plus koto, that changes into a noun, and that comes before ga dekiru. Lastly, we're almost to the part we're practicing. Don't worry. It's just there's a lot of information to get through. These are, as I mentioned at the beginning, you can use them interchangeably between these two. Koto ga dekiru versus taberareru or tabereru. And there's two ways you can use it. You can say, this is something I can do. We're talking about ability, as in I am capable of doing this. I personally cannot eat natto. Like I'll probably if I try to eat it. So I would say taberarenai. I can write kanji, so I can say kakeru. That's an ability that I've cultivated over time. I cannot. What can I not do? I cannot snowboard. So I might say snowboard ga dekinai. These are all abilities. The second one that we're going to see in just a minute is talking about the possibility of something happening. But let's look at some examples. This is the easiest. Natto, as we were talking about before, natto ga taberaremasu ka? Or natto ga taberemasu ka? Here, this is something that comes up. I still hear it, even after being here for 16 years. People say, hey, can you eat natto? They're not asking me, are you in a household where it's possible to eat natto, where natto appears? They're not asking me that, more than likely. They're saying, are you physically capable? Do you have the ability to eat natto? There might be, kids learn kanji in Japanese, and you might say, oh, this kanji, children can't read it, typically. It's too difficult. So, 子供はこの漢字が読めない. And again, I'm not speaking about, oh, they would never have the chance to read it because it's, I don't know, super rare kanji that only adults can see. It's not that. It's talking about their ability. They're first year students, so they haven't learned how to read it yet. Lastly, this one is a nice way of showing thanks about something that you were able to do. パーティーに来られて嬉しい. So I'm happy because I was able to come to the party. パーティーに来られて嬉しい. But again, you're saying, okay, maybe I took off time from work, so I'm able. I have the ability to come to this party. So before we jump into the second category, I'd like to practice this a little bit. And I'm going to say, for those that are participating, I'd like you to give 2 sentences if you can, not at the same time. But I'd like for you to have one, at least one, that uses dekiru or dekinai. Dekiru kind of might feel like the cheat way because you can just say noun ga dekinai. And it's so simple and easy. I would also like you to try one of these potential form verbs. Tell me something you can eat or you cannot eat. Or tell me something you can do or cannot do. So I'll give you a few minutes to give that a try. And again, if you have questions, what's this verb? I'm not sure how to say this. Just feel free to ask. Say, how would I say, dance or skydive? And we'll be happy to help you out. You can be positive, you can be negative, you can say what you can do, what you can't do. You can make it up. You can just say, I can fly. That's fine. That one, I'm going to hold off on that dekiru, the very first one that came up. Tomodachi ga dekiru. That's actually not one that you would use unless it was in the past. You might use it, but that's a really special one. I'm glad you brought it up because that's a really interesting usage of dekiru. So if I forget to mention Tomodachi ga dekiru, please bring it back up. Bug me about it because that's a really interesting one. The person that gave the two sentences together, can you switch that second sentence to use the potential form of hanasu? Just for practice. Mienai or mieru is actually an interesting word that it's potential, but it's not potential at the same time. And if we have a chance, I'll talk about the difference between. So I'm putting this in here so you all can remind me. Mieru versus mirareru. So I think we'll have time at the end to mention that. If you'd like to participate, but you're having a hard time thinking of, something that you can say, then stick with the example that we were doing before. Tell me something that you can eat or something that you cannot eat. Nani nani ga taberemasu or nani nani ga taberemasen. Hankokugo ga hanasemasu. When you're dealing with other languages, it's interesting because you can say that. That totally works. It's also common to say Kankokugo ga wakarimasu. I can speak it, I understand it. You can even say Kankokugo ga dekimasu. There's a lot of different ways you can talk about one's ability to use a language. If I'm ever able to split my body in half and make another version of Renshu, it might be for Korean. But I don't see that happening. All right, I'll give you a few more seconds. I see maybe one or two people typing, and then we will jump into the next category. And then I'm holding on to those two things I want to talk about after, and we'll grab them later on. I'm going to continue, but if you are still typing, please feel free to finish your typing. I don't want you to stop and delete it. You've taken the time to start, go ahead and finish. I will, however, keep talking a little bit. So we talked about ability. I can do this. I have the ability to do this. The other version is that possibility. And we might say possible, we might say able to in English. We also say can in the same way. But this one's talking about and I'll answer your question in just a minute. The possibility is talking about whether something can be done in a certain situation. So for example, if you are in Tokyo, depending on where you are in Tokyo, what building you're in, you may be able to see Mount Fuji. In Niigata, where I am, you cannot. We're way too far away. But with this situation, you are not talking about your physical ability, as in my eyes are not good enough to see Mount Fuji. you were saying whether this situation is possible. So, ここから富士山が見られない. You can't see Fujisan from here. You can't see Mount Fuji from here. To give you a different example, if you go to Tokyo, we were talking about Pokemon earlier in the previous lesson. You can Pokemon Center ni ikemasu. You can go to the Pokemon Center. It's not referring to you have the money to get there, or you are physically able to walk there. It's saying this is a possibility. It's there, so you can go. The second one, in Japan, you can ride the Shinkansen. You can ride the bullet train. Nihon de Shinkansen ni noremasu yo. And then last one, using that arieru that we had before, 宇宙人がどこかにあり得る. It's possible that they're out there somewhere. And let me give you one more example. Kono eiga wa kodomo ga miremasen. This movie can't be seen by children. And again, this is maybe it's rated R or whatever R is in your country, an adult only movie. It's not saying that kids don't have the physical ability to see these light waves with their eyes. It's just saying they can't see it. It's not a possibility for them. この映画は子供が見れません. So I would like to practice this in just a minute, but before that, because it ties into this section, I'd like to talk about the two things that came up earlier, or three things rather. First, the question that's just above me. You can use frequency verbs or words, with these potential forms. For example, I can sometimes go to Tokyo. I can, but not always. So you might say, Tokidoki Tokyo ni ikeru yo. Maybe this is a long distance relationship and you met someone in Tokyo and they say, I don't know if this will work out. You're in America, I'm in Tokyo. This isn't gonna work. And you say, Tokidoki Nihon Tokyo ni ikeru yo. I can go from Tokyo from time to time. And that's fine. We haven't gotten to conditionals yet, and so I'm going to hold off on that now. If we have time after the lesson, I can mention it, but it's a bit more of an advanced statement. So let's put that on the side for now. Okay, going back to the other two questions that came up, or questions I brought up. Someone said this earlier. Tomodachi ga dekiru. Now, this is a really interesting phrase. It's very common. It's very common Japanese. And it's strange because you don't think about friends as being something that there's a potential added to it. Like what is the action with friends? And in this case, it means this. It's talking about making friends. And dekiru is often used to talk about the ability to make something, or to get something done. And so if you were trying to convince someone to go to school and they're like, I don't want to go to the new school, I'm scared. And you say, well, the new school, you can make friends. You can say that. Gakkou de tomodachi ga dekiru yo. And in this sense, you're talking about the creation of, that friendship. And if, for example, my son, and we said this to him a year ago when he first started going to elementary school, he might have come back the next day and said this. Tomodachi ga dekita. And he's saying, I made a friend, or I was able to make a friend. This is very common Japanese. You can also hear it with, boyfriend or girlfriend. Kanojo ga dekita. I got a girlfriend is probably what we'd say in English. You don't usually say, I was able to get a girlfriend. We say, I got a girlfriend, I got a boyfriend. And we use dekiru or dekita in Japanese for that situation. Now, there was one more thing someone talked about. They said, I'm short, so I can't see. And they use this word, mieru. And if you look it up, it usually, I believe, will be translated like this, to be visible. But you might think in that situation, that person said they're short, so they can't see. So in English, we're using the potential. You say, oh, I'm too short, or it's too bright, I can't see. And so how does this differ from these verbs, the ones we just learned, mirareru or mireru? In this situation, the difference between these two is best described with the usage. Mieru, by talking about visible, you are taking the focus away from the speaker's ability, and it's talking more about whether or not whatever they're looking at is in their line of sight. So with it's not just transitive versus intransitive, because those aren't really transitive intransitive pairs. It kind of is. You can see it in that sense, but I wouldn't say, oh, mieru is the transitive form, because the other one's the potential form. It's not transitive or intransitive in that sense. It's the potential form of mieru. But something you often hear in, say, anime or situation is, say, all the lights go out and you can't see anything. You would say, well, the negative form of that, you'd say, nani mo mienai, I can't see anything. And here, you're not talking about your ability. Your eyes did not just stop working. It's that the situation is such that you cannot see anything. Or if there's a bird in the sky and you point to someone, you say, hey, can you see that bird? And they say, oh, I can see it, I can see it. They would say mieru. They're not saying, oh, my eyes are so much better all of a sudden, I can see it. They're saying, it's in my vision, it's visible. Mirareru or mireru focuses more on the actual ability. And so you don't hear it that often, because there's not a whole lot of situations where you're talking about not being physically able to see something. So you hear mieru more often. You might hear mireru when you talk about the possibility of a situation. That was that second, if I could spell situation correctly. Until recently, they just, I think like 2 days ago, they just took this down. But in a section of Tokyo, you were able to see this gigantic Gundam, the mech. It was this huge Gundam that was just standing out on the next to a building. And it was in a place called Odaiba, which is spelled like this. Well, let me do this. Let's do Tokyo, because everyone knows that. Tokyo de. Until recently, this was true. Sorry, not mieru. Excuse me. And not that one either. I can type. Let's try that one. Let's try that one time. One more time. Tokyo de Gundam ga mireru. So it's possible for you to see that Gundam if you're in Tokyo. That's usually where you see mireru being used. Mieru is more common because you're usually talking about whether or not you can see something due to some other factor, due to it being behind a tree or being too far or it being dark. Okay, I think that is all we have talked about. We have a few more minutes, so I wanted to practice the possibility one a little bit more. Now, we're all in different countries, and so I'd like to know what is something you can do in your country. And if you don't want to tell us what country you're in, that's fine. You can just say ここで, and we can just guess. But if I was back in America, I'm from Texas originally, and this is the joke that Japanese people always say about Texas. They say, "Oh, you're in Texas. They have all those big steaks there, right?" And so I might say, in Texas, 大きなステーキが食べれる. In Texas, you can eat a big steak. It sounds like a sentence out of a English textbook in Japan. But tell me about where you are, either where you're from or where you are. What's something you can eat? What's something you can see? What's something you can do where you happen to be? Include your country or location, or don't include it. It's up to you. So the first person, they said you can go to the beach. Maybe they're on an island where, the beach is closer than not. What else? What can other people do where they are right now? I actually don't know what coral reef is. That's a good question. Let's see what I'm gonna guess based on frequency. It's probably the second one. Although that one sounds like a specific type of coral reef. But it's one of the two. It's either kansho or sangosho. I'm very jealous of that last sentence because that total solar eclipse that's coming up, Dallas, Texas, where I'm from, is one of the key spots to be in, and I'm on the other side of the world. So my family, parents, and siblings are all going to see the eclipse. So you can see the eclipse in New York. Yeah, and if you want to talk about your spot, you want to talk about some other place, go for it. We don't know where you're from. In New York, you can eat delicious pizza. Okay. Well, thank you for the oh, and here's one more. Ah, the Trinidads. Cool. I did not know that. Okay, well, we are about ready to wrap up today's lesson. And just in case you need practice on, these conjugation forms, don't forget that inside of Renshu, you're about to see my Renshu dashboard, which is a mess because I'm always testing things. But don't forget that we have verb conjugations inside of Renshu. I've got mine right here. But if you don't have it, you can go down to manage your schedules, which everyone has, and then all schedules. These are the ones that are pre-built that you may or may not have. And right here underneath Renshu recommended, we've got, and these are relatively new in the last couple of months. We've got adjective and verb conjugations, and then you can choose which types of conjugations you want to practice. So if you'd like to practice those, definitely give it a shot, and it's a really good way to practice it. Otherwise, this video will be available in Discord and in Renshu sooner than later, as soon as I get it up. So if you need to go back and look at this, feel free to do so. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us and hope to see you next time. Bye.